Our dear learners, this is from Trinity College in Abingo. I'm going to present History A-Level, Paper 210, Stroke Paper 3, that is European History, on the topic of the 1830 revolutions in Europe, presented by Odong Paul Apalokwang, Teacher, History Department. I hope you are all fine and protected by God, and continue following the SOP as we pray for the end of this pandemic. Now, this topic, the 1830 revolutions in Europe, is picked from the major topic of the revolutionary era, 1815-1848. Between 1815 and 1848, the history of Europe was characterized by revolutions, but the major ones were recorded in 1830 and then 1848. That is after the downfall of Napoleon Bonaparte. In these 1830 revolutions, we shall look at the background information, the causes, the effects, the common features. Then I will give you a question, a working question for you to try, at least some 2 questions to try to answer. Now, before we look at the background, it is very important to know what a revolution is. We don't take it for granted. A revolution is a change. In this case, we talk of 1830 revolution as a political, social, and economic changes that took place in Europe in 1830. A revolution can be political, social, economic, can be catastrophic, can be fundamental, can be gradual, depending on the aims. But most of the political revolutions are catastrophic, that is with the bloodshed and other forms of destruction. Now, in 1830, the revolutions occurred in various parts of Europe. It first started in France, that is in July 1830. That was a revolution which destroyed and doomed the restored Bourbon monarchy under Charles X once and for all. And there was the creation of a new government in France known as the Orleans monarchy under Louis Philippe. Then immediately after that, in August, the success of this revolution inspired liberals and nationalists that were suppressed, oppressed, and exploited to rise up in Europe. Therefore, in 1830, that is in August, just 1 month after the French Revolution, a revolution occurred in Belgium, a reaction against the Vienna settlement, which had amalgamated the 2 states of Belgium and Holland to form a state of Netherlands, and gave the Dutch the power to dominate the Belgians. Now, there are other states that experienced the revolutions, especially in Italian states, even the German states, and also Poland. Now, these revolutions were led by prominent liberals, nationalists, and educated people. For example, in France, prominent journalists like Adolphe Thiers were major people behind this revolution. Even in Belgium, Polignac, among others, were leaders of this revolution. Now, the causes of these 1830 revolutions, there are similar causes that actually cut across all these countries. All All these revolutions were largely a result of the Vienna Settlement of 1815, which had made a very big mistake. For example, restoration of legitimate rulers who were dictators, like in France. The restored Bourbon monarchy under Charles X was characterized by despotism. He at one time asserted that I would rather chop wood instead of reigning in the fashion of the King of England, meaning that these restored aristocrats were prominent dictators, and because of that, revolutions occurred as a reaction against such despotism, characterized with arbitrary arrest, imprisonment, press censorship, among others. Even the Congress system, that was a product of the Vienna settlements, continued to promote the unfair terms of the Vienna settlements. That is why we say its collapse partly also contributed, because up to 1830, the nationalists were suppressed, but after its collapse, people rose up to fight for their rights. Look at the Metternich system. Earlier on, we talked about the Metternich policies of censorship, the press censorship, control of correspondence, his attempt to use force to suppress revolutions. All of these made nationalists to rise up. The despotic nature of the regime that was characterized by arbitrary arrests, among others. The success of 1789 French Revolution inspired the nationalists to fight for their independence and for their rights. Economic crisis in Europe in 1830, which was characterized by unemployment, low standard of living, and the government in power failed to provide solutions to some of these economic crises, such as poverty, unemployment, population pressure. By 1830, there were evidence of population increase, but in most of these countries, the government did not plan for the increasing population, which therefore resulted into several negative impacts. For example, the shortage in social services, and at the same time, many people remain economically disadvantaged. Look at the collapse of the Congress system. We have already talked about it. The spread of diseases in Europe, like cholera, which directly hit Central Europe, and the government failed to provide a solution. This made the government unpopular. The rise of prominent revolutionary leaders, earlier on I've already mentioned, the like of Adolf Thiers, the like of Polignac. These were key leaders in mobilizing the masses to fight the unjust regimes. The desire for unification, specifically in the Italian states and the German states. The unfair policies, especially where the minority were dominating the majority. A good example was in Belgium, where the government was very dominated by the Dutch, was very discriminative, came up with the unfair policies to suppress and exploit the Belgians. For example, unfair representation in the parliament, unfair policies of taxation of the Belgian diet, which consists of bread, the policy of taxation. All of these unfair policies created a situation which resulted into the revolution. Then the success of revolutions elsewhere. For instance, the success of the July Revolution of 1848 eventually provoked others also. It motivated others to spark of the revolution. The spread of liberalism and its ideology, fighting for liberty, freedom of press, freedom of association, and various rights which were suppressed, and the growth of nationalism. So I expect students to differentiate between liberalism and nationalism. When you talk of nationalism, that is where people were fighting for their independence, because during the Vienna settlement, smaller states were put under bigger powers. Now, this these causes were political, social, and economic. But the revolution had impact. The impact were also political, social, and economic. For example, you can either put it political, social, and economic, or you can group them thematically into negative and positive impacts. For example, the revolution was characterized by violence, which eventually led to bloodshed, destruction of property, loss of lives. It also exposed the weakness of a metallic system. It exposed the unfairness of the Vienna settlements. And above all, these revolutions were climax of the disgruntlement of the people against the outcome of the Vienna settlement, that is the Congress system. Therefore, it contributed to the final collapse of the Congress system. In some cases, this revolution promoted diplomacy. It promoted diplomacy. For instance, 1830 revolution in Belgium ended with the London Convention of 1839. So this diplomacy eventually refers to the meetings that were held as a result of these revolutions. It also laid the foundation for the occurrence of the future revolution, like 1848 revolutions which occurred. Some of the nationalists learned a lesson from 1830. The revolution led to the rise of some new leaders, like in France, there was the rise of the Orleans monarchy under Louis Philippe. In as much as there was a rise of new leaders, on the other side, it led to the overthrow of some of these despotic leaders. Then apart from that, the revolution led to the spread of revolutionary ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity that is spread throughout Europe. Now, these revolutions had some common features. Common features are common characteristics. You may be asked a question that examine the common features. So the common features can be viewed from the common causes, the common effects, and also the common cause, how this revolution occurred. For example, these revolutions almost occurred at the same time. The revolutions were led by intellectuals. These were educated people, not academic lumpens. The revolution, for instance, when we talk of Adolphians, these were lawyers, these were highly educated people. The revolution occurred in urban centers. It started from urban centers. For example, in Belgium, it started from Brussels and then spread to up country towns. Then the revolution were also reactions against the Vienna settlement. Most of this revolution occurred as a reaction against the Congress system. The revolutions were characterized by bloodshed, desire for liberal demands. So you find that the common features, in brief, can be viewed from the common causes, the common effects, and the common cause. How this revolution occurred. Look at how these revolutions were almost motivated by economic distress. Now, when you look at these 1830 revolutions very well, and you understand the detail of why it occurred, how it occurred, and the outcome, it gives you a very clear picture of the 1848 revolutions. It will be very easy for you to read the revolutions of 1848. And in brief, in Europe, the history of Europe, revolutions that occurred, the 1789 French Revolution, the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, 1830 Revolution, 1848 revolutions. These revolutions occurred because the old system did not favor the masses. Whenever people need a change, it means that People are tired of the old system and they expect new system, which can be, in most cases, if it is a political demand for change, it in most cases end up in bloodshed or can be achieved through force. As I conclude this very brief digital interaction, I continue to pray for you. We pray for each other, for the safety. We pray God protect us, and we continue to thank Him for the gift of life. As I advise you to observe the Ministry of Health guidelines, and for further information about this and many other videos, please visit the link below. I remain the 21st political philosopher, Don Paul Apalokwang. God bless you, and I wish you good luck.